Hello guys, I like cheese, and I like playing games. I am archiving myself, playing these story-driven games as an additional motivation since I always skip and save them for quote-unquote other days, whatever reason I come up with just to not play them. Also because I've been a sucker for live service games for so long that I didn't have the time to play all these great games through the years.
Final Fantasy IX.
After the tech-heavy worlds of FF7, and especially the mess that was FF8, I was really curious to see how this return to high fantasy would feel. And honestly, this is exactly what I needed after FF8. The game immediately signals what it's about. We're back to crystals, medieval kingdoms, airships, black mages, and that classic fantasy aesthetic. After Midgar's urban sprawl and Garden's military academies, stepping into Alexandria and seeing actual castles and theaters, along with royalties, felt like coming home to what Final Fantasy used to be. The plot revolves around classic fantasy themes: kingdoms, war, identity, and mortality. But what I really appreciated is how character-driven the story is. It's not about saving the world from the start. It begins with the thieves pretending to be a theater troupe kidnapping a princess. That small-scale beginning really works. The themes about life, death, and what it means to exist are pretty deep, especially with the whole manufactured beings storyline with the Black Mages and Vivi's existential crisis. It tackles some heavy stuff without being as convoluted as FF8's time compression nonsense or FF7's more sci-fi elements. The pacing feels good too. You're not stuck in one location for too long like Midgar in FF7, and the story doesn't meander as much as FF8 did with its school setting that went nowhere.
The ability system is pretty straightforward. You equip gear, learn abilities from that gear by gaining AP, and once mastered, you can keep those abilities even when switching equipment. It's generic, sure, but you know what? After dealing with FF8's junction system, generic feels refreshing. Sometimes simple is better. It does become a bit linear toward the end due to similarity. Eventually, everyone has most of the same support abilities equipped, and you're just optimizing stats. But I still enjoyed the process of mastering abilities. It fulfills the grinding aspect of JRPGs enough, but not overly convoluted like FF8's. There's something satisfying about that completion aspect, deciding which gear to use based on what abilities you still need to learn. The system encourages you to use different equipment pieces, rather than just equipping the strongest gear immediately, which I appreciated. It adds some strategy to equipment management. I'm just kind of annoyed that there's a thingy about gears that gives stats, if leveling up while equipped gives a portion of these stats as a bonus to the character. So if you wanted to be optimal, you would want to equip stat-boosting items while leveling up. Characters. The good, the bad, the developed. The characters in FF9 feel genuinely developed, which is a huge plus. Let me go through each of them. Zidane. Main character, and I think he's pretty decent. A bit too cocky at times, but that's how he grew up. And with his backstory reveal at the end, you kind of know the reasoning of why he is like that. Gameplay-wise, a very typical thief job for Final Fantasy. I just hate how Mug is kind of shit in this iteration, since it just deals random damage and not the usual attack and steal combined into one command. Vivi. I really like Vivi. He seems like a young kid who doesn't know much about the world, suddenly gets mixed up and discovers his existence and identity being that of a puppet or a tool. I understand his reactions and motives, as well as his reasoning behind his actions after the reveal. Combat-wise, as a black mage, he's pretty much your usual glass cannon type of a character. As a black mage, he has the different elemental spells, offensive spells, and just your trusted damage dealer in any party. Garnet/Dagger. At first, I was kind of annoyed about this princess girl. A bit headstrong, like the girls in the previous games. But she's grown on me. I liked her a bit at the end, even forgiving her mother, the queen. A bit naive, but I understand. Gameplay-wise, since there's actually two white mages, it's kind of a mixed bag.
They split the summons to each, so Dagger itself just became a summon character at the endgame. Steiner. Okay, I really didn't enjoy Steiner, especially in the beginning. Similar to how I didn't like Barrett's personality in Final Fantasy VII, I hated how he's too stuck up on being a knight, protecting the princess, stereotyping Zidane as a typical crook, thinks he's on a high horse compared to everyone else. I don't even know what Beatrix saw in this dude. I hated this guy from the beginning, so as much as possible, I didn't use him. Typical warrior gameplay, but a bit cool with the synergy with Vivi. Freya. Typical Dragoon gameplay. I somewhat avoided since I really hated Dragoons. In regards to story, I think the subplot with Fratli is a bit underdeveloped, but the Burmecia storyline is a decent arc. Quina. My favorite character in this game, I think. Quina's similar to Vivi in regards to naivety, but with the focus on eating and food. Being a blue mage, this game having somewhat decent spells, which makes Quina way more useful for me than the others. I also really like frog catching. Aiko, the other summoner white mage. She's a bit stronger offensively due to Holy Spell, and character-wise, she's a kid who thinks she's all alone in the world. So she didn't really come off as annoying for me. She reads the room faster than usual, realizing Zidane and Dagger's feeling for each other, etc. I liked her both story and gameplay-wise. Amarant, typical edgy character. He joined pretty late, and I already decided on my party, so I actually haven't used him that much, so I don't have much comments. Since he joined when the group is bigger, he felt like just an additional comment or one-liner after every group discussion. Also, as a monk and a ninja, I never really explored the gameplay aspect. On to some of the gameplay systems in FF9, starting with the trance system. Basically, this game's version of limit breaks. Seems fine overall. They provide unique abilities for each character, and some are genuinely powerful. Unlike FF7, where you could save limit breaks for when you needed them, Trance activates automatically when the gauge fills, which can be annoying when it triggers on a random encounter instead of a boss fight. One thing I somewhat hate, and this is a big issue for me, is that because Zidane is the main protagonist and he's a thief/rogue class, there's almost always very strong or unique gear hidden behind bosses, which means you have to stall boss fights, sometimes for a really long time, until you successfully steal the gear, and just then you can proceed to actually kill the boss. It completely disrupts the flow of boss fights. Maybe it's because it's a bit similar to how you want to use junction system on every fight to get spells and stuff in FF8, and not just typically fighting and battling. Instead of engaging with the boss mechanics, you're just spamming steal over and over, hoping RNG is on your side. Miss the steal, you permanently lose that gear. It adds this unnecessary anxiety to every boss encounter. Did I steal everything? Should I check a guide? Am I ready to finish this fight? It's a design choice that punishes you for not being a completionist, and I really didn't like it.
Side content, the good and the frustrating.
The side quests and mini-games are a mixed bag. Some I genuinely enjoyed. Frog catching was fun, the Mog mail delivery added some charm to the world, but others? The quiz guy was annoying to complete. But here's my bigger issue. I'm curious how people without prior knowledge would even discover some of this stuff. The friendly creature quests, the super boss Ozma, chocographs and all the hidden content. It's so out of place how to discover and finish these things. Like, who naturally figures out the friendly Yan side quest without a guide? Or all the specific requirements for Ozma? This was before widespread internet guides were common, so I genuinely don't know how anyone completed this stuff on their first playthrough. It feels like content designed to sell strategy guides, rather than being organically discoverable. The Chocobo Hot and Cold game is actually pretty fun, and very, very time-consuming. If there's no speed up on the Steam version of the game, I wouldn't have bothered with this. But again, how do you naturally discover all the chocograph locations and what they unlock? At least the chocographs have some hint, but the pepper locations? How would you even know where to start checking for dive spots? How would you know if you have everything? Unless you'll check every pixel and have no prior idea, you won't have any hints regarding these.
World and presentation. The pre-rendered backgrounds look gorgeous, even now. The world feels lived in and cohesive in a way that fits the high fantasy setting. Each location has its own distinct identity. Alexandria, Lindblum, Burmecia, the Black Mage Village, they all feel like real places with their own cultures. The music is fantastic, as always. When comparing to the series, after my disappointment of FF8 and the groundbreaking but sometimes messy FF7, FF9 feels like a refinement. It knows what it wants to be, a love letter to classic Final Fantasy, and it executes that vision well. It doesn't try to reinvent everything like Final Fantasy VIII did. It doesn't have the cultural impact of FF7, but what it does is create a cohesive, character-driven experience that reminds you why you fell in love with JRPGs in the first place. Story-wise, it's more focused than Final Fantasy VII, and infinitely more coherent than Final Fantasy VIII. Gameplay-wise, the ability system might be simpler than Materia, but it's not fighting against itself like Junctions were. If I'm ranking the PS1 era, FF7 for impact and ambition, FF9 for execution and heart, and FF8 can stay at the bottom. For these trio of games,
Final thoughts. Final Fantasy IX is a reminder that sometimes going back to your roots is sometimes the right move. After 2 games trying to push the series in more modern, experimental directions, FF9 said, remember what made Final Fantasy great, and delivered on that promise. Is it perfect? Number, the stealing system is frustrating, some side content is too obscure, and Steiner annoyed me for way too long. But the strong character development, the return to high fantasy, and the overall cohesive experience make it one of the better entries in the series. If you've been playing through the series like I have, FF9 feels like a breath of fresh air. It's Final Fantasy remembering what it does best, and doing it really well. The next era of Final Fantasy games are what I'm really curious about, since they, at least for me, didn't have much exposure, the PS2 games, and I'm quite excited to play them soon.